Hello everyone, my name is Sanjay, and today's topic for discussion or training is NSS. This is the first training in the series. We will have a couple of more trainings, for NSS Advanced and NSS Deep, but let's start with the NSS Basic first. So the agenda for today's training is what is NSS? Why do we need NSS? What is the log delivery mechanism NSS uses? How and where we can deploy it? And few troubleshooting and basic check commands, configuration check commands. And for the Q&A, you can ask questions in the comment section, and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. So now let's start. What is NSS? So if you are a Zscaler customer, you might forwarding web or non-web traffic to Zscaler, right? From your office location, from home users, right? Whatever traffic user browse, Zscaler logs that traffic, right? Kind of web log or firewall log. And Zscaler store these logs in the Nanolog cluster, a Nanolog server they have. Now, by default, these logs are stored in Zscaler for 3 or for 6 months. And if you want, right, they can store it for 1 year, but you'll have to, subscribe an additional subscription. Now, what would you do if you need these logs for more than 1 year, right? In that case, you probably want to, send these logs from Zscaler Nanolog cluster to your local storage or log server, and maybe then you can view these logs to your SIM solution. So that's that's where the NSS comes in picture, because this is used to get logs from the Zscaler cloud, the Nanolog cluster, and then it forwards these logs to your SIM solution or your log server. Now, once you have configured and deployed the NSS, what it does, it creates an outbound connection to Zscaler cloud and outbound connection to your SIM solution, right? The logs NSS receives, right, from the Nanolog cluster, they are in very highly compressed format, right? One more thing to remember, since I mentioned that the logs are stored for 6 months in Zscaler, once they forward, it's just a copy of log you get, through NSS to your Nanolog or to your SIM solution. The logs are still remain there in the Nanolog cluster for 6 months. Okay. Now, what exactly NSS do when it receives these logs? As I mentioned, the logs are in very highly compressed format. So NSS decompress these logs, right? De-tokenize them and applies the configuration filter, right? So you may have, a feed configured where you do not want certain logs to be, sent to your SIM solution. So that's what, these filters are get applied to the NSS. And then what NSS does, it convert these logs to the configured output format. The output format option is again, in the NSS feed when you configure it, right? And then it consume them and make them, in a way that your SIM solution can, understand these logs and forward these logs from NSS to your SIM server over a TCP connection. Now, if you check, the diagram, that's what it says. You have an office location, right? Where they are accessing internet bound traffic, and traffic goes to the internet, right? Let's say Google traffic, YouTube, Facebook, any traffic. Now that logs stored in the Nanolog cluster. Nanolog cluster sends that traffic to your NSS web or firewall, NSS for firewall, and then that NSS firewall sends these logs to your SIM solution. Okay. Now, why do we need it, right? Can't NSS or can't we get the logs without NSS, right? Can't Zscaler send directly log to your syslog server, your SIM solution? Actually, no. And we already know that why we need it, because we need logs for more than 1 year. But the reason that we need NSS, because logs are in very, I mean, they are highly compressed format, right? And your NSS, your SIM solution or syslog may not directly understand them. So NSS is the one which decompress these log, make them understand for your syslogging, service, right? Other thing is that you can directly connect, right, to the Zscaler Nanolog cluster, uh, right? Okay. Now, what is the log delivery mechanism? So when you deploy NSS, right, in your environment, it doesn't store logs in a disk. What it does is that it store or process the logs from the memory itself, right? And it buffer these logs for at least for an hour, right? And that buffering helps when there is a connection issues between NSS and SIM solution, right? Or the even when issues between the NSS and SMCA server, which is a nanolog cluster, which which where the Zscaler log stored. If there is an issue between that connection, that buffering at the cluster for 1 hour, it can resend these logs again to the NSS server. And that's what the delivery mechanism. The logs are sent from NSS after decompressing, making them in a format you have configured so that your SIM solution can understand to your SIM solution, and fetch log from the nanolog server to the NSS in a compressed format. Now, if you're deploying NSS, you have three options. Either you can deploy it on a VM in the AWS Amazon Web Services or in Microsoft Azure. In this training, we'll be discussing the VMware deployment. All right. So for the VMware deployment, or deployment in Azure or AWS, you need a subscription. NSS for web and NSS for firewall. There are two type of subscription for two type of logs, right? Firewall and web logs. For the VMware, you would need two CPU core, one for the control channel and another for the data channel traffic. The memory is something depends on the traffic, right? And the logging, how many users you have, how much log that one user per hour process, right? Or generate, right? Based on that, you get a memory. And that's something you can compute on a Zscaler portal, and based on that, you can configure an NSS configuration. Data disk size is usually 500 GB. Now, what would be the host spec, right? For the VMware host, you would need VMware ESI or ESXi 5.0 and above. The CPU should be 64-bit or equivalent, right? The CPU speed should be 2.4 gigahertz or greater, right? And of course, you need a client. For the networking part, you will need E1000 interface network adapter. And then you would need two virtual NICs, right? One is for the management purpose, and another is for the service interface. So the management interface, a virtual NIC, is basically to manage your NSS, configuration, right? To download configuration from Zscaler Cloud and all. The service interface is the one which connects for the logging purpose, right? The data connection to the Zscaler and the SIM solution. Now, there is a firewall requirement as well, and you only need to enable outbound connections, right? There is no need to create an inbound rule on your firewall, because NSS only makes outbound connection. You can check the firewall rule, right? What IP and domain you need to allow in config.zscaler.com/ your Zscaler domain, zscaler.net 123/NSS. Now the next step is, right, when we know what configuration we need, the next step is to go to the administrator portal and configure the NSS server. So what you do for that, you log into your admin portal, click on administrator, and then click on add NSS server, right? You give the details, right? You fill all these details, and then you download a certificate. Certificate is the one which authenticate or authorize that NSS server to the Zscaler cloud. So let me open the portal and show. All right. Once you do that, right, you deploy, download the virtual appliance, compute the configuration specs based on the details you have filled in, right? And again, then you import that. I mean, you download the OVA file, import it in your VMware server, and then you configure the NSS. So let's see what options we have. So this is my portal. Let me just log out first. So my domain is on Zscaler2, right? You can see admin.zscaler2.net. This is my admin account, and let me first log in. Okay. So I have already, configured the NSS server, the NSS feed, and the NSS as well to save some time. But I'll walk you through all the steps, right? Okay. So I'm logged into my cloud, right? What I go to administration, right? From the right top, I click on Nanolog streaming service. Now here I can see I already have three Nanolog server configured. Let me just delete one, right? And then uh, I'll get an option to configure a new NSS server because I have a limit of three, but that's okay. I think it is used in the feed somewhere. Let me just remove it from there first. Okay, so it's used here. Let me remove this first. So that's another thing, right? So if you have configured NSS server and then you have configured feeds and and you want to delete the NSS server, so before deleting the NSS server, you need to either remove the NSS server from the feed, right? Or you delete the feed first and then you delete the NSS server. So like I'm doing now, uh, this NSS server was configured under three feeds, right? So I deleted all these feeds. Now I can delete this NSS server. Let me show you. Yeah, you see, now it's deleted, right? Once you delete, make sure you activate the changes. Okay. Now, okay. So I already have this NSS Cloud 2, which is up and running, and that's where where I'll show you all the configuration. But just to show you the option, what we get when we click on Add NSS Server, right? Okay, I think I cannot add more. Okay, all right. That's the thing. So I'll check on this. I need more, I think there is only two NSS I can add. Let me see if I can disable this and see if it allows me. No. So yeah, probably I'll have to delete this NSS as well, and then I'll get an option to configure a second NSS server. But yeah, let me just open that what options we'll get. So once you click on add NSS server, you'll have to fill in the name. You have to select that NSS type. So either it's NSS for web or NSS for firewall. Web means web traffic, firewall means non-web traffic, right? And then you select the status, whether you want to disable or enable it, right? And you save it. Once you save it, then you get an option to download a certificate. And later on, you may want to change the certificate, right? To use regenerate it, install the certificate, right? The healthy state, I mean, the NSS comes in healthy state when it can connect to your, SIM Zscaler as well, right? Then only it comes into healthy state. Otherwise, you would see, NSS always in the unhealthy status. Okay. Now, the next step is so you configured the NSS server. Now let's deploy, right? Let's deploy that and download a OVA file for our VMware server. So you click on the option deploy NSS virtual appliance, right? And then from there you select a type, whether you want to deploy NSS for web or firewall. You give it a number of users you have, right? And try to go for a higher number. Let's say you have a 50 users, so may type here 100, right? Just to keep some scope, right, for the growth. And let's say per hour transaction is 1,000. You are deploying it in a VMware platform, so you click on compute. Once you do that, it gives you the VMware specs, right? So it says you need 4 GB of RAM, 500 GB of disk storage, 64 GB of a CPU, right? And number of 2 cores, right? The CPU cores. And the bandwidth you needed, that's 0.46 Mbps. All right. And then you download this OVA file. So let me click on it. And as soon as I click on it, you see it started downloading that, right? I already have it, so I'll cancel. Okay. So this bandwidth part is one which is important, and that's all totally depend on how many users you have and peak transaction per hour. Okay. So we have the NSS now, right? We have all the configurations. We have downloaded the certificate from here, and then we downloaded the OVA file. Then you would import that to your NSS or EXI server and import that OVA file, right? After importing the OVA file, you can log into your NSS, right? You reboot it. Reboot, turn it on, and log into your NSS. The first thing you would do to log in is use a username zsroot and default password zsroot. Since I already configured it, but I'll show you that what are the first command you would do, right? So the first command you do on an NSS is sudo NSS configure. Now, what this command does, this command gives you option to configure the NSS networking part. So it's asking us to fill in the name server, the DNS. So I already have it, but let me type the same NSS server or name server again. So that's 8.8.8.8, the Google DNS. Okay. Now it's asking me if I want to add a new or additional name server. I say no, one is enough. The next, it's asking me to fill the management interface IP address, EM0 interface IP address. My management interface IP address is 10.0.0.225. So let me just type it again. I can enter. I can hit enter as well, and it'll take which is already there. Well, let me just enter just to show you that what should be the format. So the format should be /24, right? You can do 224.224.224.0. It won't take it. You have to enter in this format. Okay. Now you have to enter the default gateway for this management interface. And in our case, this is 0.0.254. Now it's turn off a service interface where I have an address of 10.0.0.226, right? And again, /24. And the default gateway for this is 10.0.0.254, right? It's the same network, right? So the default gateway is same again. Okay, that's what the minimum configuration you need to fill in the IP details. Now you can check what you have entered, right? So sudo NSS dump configure, right? So this dump config would show you what IP details you have entered, right? So we have entered the name server, we have entered the management IP, the gateway, the service IP, and the gateway as well, right? Now you also see the cloud name there, right? So this cloud name comes in when you import the certificate. If you haven't imported the certificate, you would see this as a blank. And that's the next step, right? We'll install a certificate here first. So now I'll check where is the certificate. So I have that certificate imported already to this NSS, right? So now I'll run a command, which is sudo NSS install. And one more thing that I have to give a full path. So the full path for this is /home/zs root, right? And then I'll give it this. Once the certificate is successfully installed, you would get a message called certificate successfully installed, right? After the certificate installation, the next step is to download the binaries because this is just a base OVA file, right? To download the binaries, you would do sudo NSS update now. This update now command, since it's the very first time you booted this NSS, may take some time, right? So you'll have to wait for a while and let this complete because it would download all the binaries for the NSS to come in and start its services. Okay, so let's wait for a while. And meanwhile, I'll just walk you through that the same step we have, in this. So this is what we done, right? We configured one of the NSS server, and then we computed the specs, download a virtual appliance, right? And I already imported, but that's what the step that you import this downloaded OVA to your uh, ESI server, right? And then you configure you use a ZS root and ZS root as a username and password to log into NSS. And this is the command what we use first, which gave us option to configure these all details, the networking part. And then we use sudo NSS dump config to just verify what we have entered. The next is that we install the certificate, right? And that certificate, we use the command sudo NSS install -cert and the full path, right? And then we check the same by this command. And now we entered update now to download the NSS binaries. I see that the download has completed and I could see that installed build version was this and the latest version is this as well. So we are already on a latest build, right? Now the next step is to start the NSS service. So you do sudo NSS start. And if everything is configured properly, right, the certificate installed correctly, and the IP details are correct, you would see NSS services would come up, and you see the message NSS service running with the process ID, and you would see some number there. Okay. So that's what, the configuration, this is all, right? That's this much detail or the configuration you needed to bring the NSS up. Now, there are a few other commands as well which are useful. Let's say the first command is sudo NSS enable auto start. So this command would help, right, to start the NSS services after the reboot of this NSS VM. Okay, so you don't have to manually do it. Now the next command, you might want to check what all connection this NSS server made to which IPs and which ports, right? So to do that, you check sudo NSS sudo NSS troubleshoot. Okay, and you want to check the connections, right? That how many what all IP this NSS is connected. So NSS connects on TCP port, so you do netstat. So netstat is similar what you see on a router or on a local system as well, right? So we can see this NSS made 3 TCP connection. The first TCP connection, we can see this is to SMCA server over port 443. This is to the SMSM server, right? SMCA and then SMSM for logging, SMCA for authentication, and this is your internal SIM server or SIM solution IP address with port 514. So this is we configure. I'll walk you through this feed configuration where we configure this IP details. Right. Okay. Now after this, the next is to configure a feed. So then you can get get the feeds, right, the logs to your SIM solution. Now to add feeds, let's go to the portal, right? Okay. Now we have this NSS server already. The next step is to configure feed for the logging. So click on NSS feed. Now I clicked on it. Now I see there is a alert feed configured, but I want to show you the web feed first. So this is what I already configured, right? So let me see what you get when you click on add NSS feed. Okay. So let me click on edit. So you can add, up to 16 NSS feed on each NSS, right? 8 for the firewall and 8 for the web. Right. Okay. Now, once you click on add NSS feed, you have to fill in a name, right? And then you have to select the type, whether this feed is for the web or firewall. Now, based on the type you selected, you would see the NSS server. If you select NSS for web, you would see the the web NSS server. And if you select NSS for firewall, you would only see NSS firewall server. Then this is your SIM solution IP address, which we saw in the NSS, and the port it connects to, right? SIM rate is something if your SIM solution is not able to process or there is a rate limiting, right? You can go for the limited SIM rate. Otherwise, unlimited is the default one. The log type, you have multiple options like alert logs, tunnel logs, SaaS security activities. The default one is the web logs because we want to send web logs through this feed. And this is the feed output type. You have multiple, so many options there based on your SIM solution, what it understand, right? Let's say if you have Splunk as a SIM solution, you may want to go to Splunk CIM, feed output type, right? If your SIM solution process or understand the QRadar output feed type, you may want to select this. Or maybe you can go for the custom or CSV feed output type. Whatever feed output you select, you would see the feed output format by default. You can edit, remove feeds there, right? That something is possible. Now the time zone is what your NSS the logs will show. So there is a time option, right, or time feed in the feed logs. So this is what the time is, right? That will be in this time zone. The duplicate setting, what we discussed, right? That 1 hour of buffer. So if you have enabled this, if connected to your breaks, that 1 hour log will be resent, right? And there are so many filters you have that what policy actions log do you want to send? Do you want to send allow logs, block logs, or any logs, right? And then you even also filter based on based on the policy reason, right? There are so many options. You can select any, right, based on your configuration, your requirement, or you can put any and it would send all the logs, right? There are other options as well, right? Who the user, from where, what type of transaction, right? What type of security logs, if there is any specific file type logs you want to send, if you want to send any specific DLP engines or DLP dictionary logs, right? So that all filter you can put in, and then NSS would apply these filters to from your that NSS would execute these filters. It will process it. It would identify that what logs you want to filter, and only send the logs to your SIM solution. What you're not blocking, right? What you're not blocking and what you want. Okay. Now after this, we have a okay. Let's just go to our PPT. So this is we have done, right? We have installed the NSS, we started the services, we verified the configuration and the connections as well. And we also added the NSS feed. Now, there are a few troubleshooting commands, and few of them we have already discussed. NSS start, stop, restart, halt is basically to start these services. NSS configure to configure the NSS, IP details, dump configure to check the configuration, IP configuration details. Install certificate basically to install the certificate. Check version is to check which version your NSS is running on. Update now to download the binaries, right? and force update. Sometime you have to run when update now doesn't work, or there is other processes running on, and you want NSS to force the update. Test firewall is another important command, and what this command does, that this command checks the blockage right in between. So sudo NSS test firewall. So this will try to connect to the SMCA, NTP, remote support URL, right? And it would check whether the connection to these host is reachable or not. So if there is a firewall in between blocking these connection, you won't see the OK status, right? You would get error there. So first it has tried to the remote support.zscaler2.net on port 12002, because that's something when you enable that remote assistant, Zscaler engineer would connect to this NSS right through their portal or through their tools. For then it connected to the NTP servers, right, and then it has connected to the update servers distribute, and then SMCA to SMCA servers, right, to cluster, and then the Kafka proxy for the NVNO alert logs, right. The next command, very important command. This is we have already checked, right? And then the troubleshoot connection and troubleshoot feed. Yeah, these are the two important command again. So sudo NSS, right? Troubleshoot connection. So what this command does, it try to connect to the SIM or to the SMCA or SMSM for a few seconds, and then it checks the connectivity, right? And then it would tell you the status for these connections. So let's just see while that's running. And the feed is the command which would test the feeds connection, and it would tell you whether the feeds are stable or there is issues with feeds. Collect diagnostic is the command which you would run, and then it would collect a diagnostic file in a zip format which you can share it with the support engineer when they ask for it, and this will help them to to grab or to check your NSS issues. Reset network, basically to reset the network services, right? And enable auto start or disable auto start that we already did, right? To start the NSS post post VM reboot. Now another important command is to enable the remote assistant, so that Zscaler support engineer can log in to your NSS and perform some troubleshooting. So support -access -start stop it, start it, stop, and status. These are the commands you can check. And at time, they may need to run debugging level logs on an NSS for troubleshooting purpose. So they may ask you to enable the debugging as well. Let's see. NSS. Okay, so this is still running. This takes some time, right? It may run for a few seconds, and then it should give you the output or the the status. While it's running, to save some time, let's discuss text. Okay, so there are some predefined, right, or well-known error codes where you get when you try to run a update now command, right? So error code 96, it's something when you have installed the invalid certificate, right? And the error code 97, it comes in when when the NSS server is not able to connect to the upgrade server, right? There may be a firewall block or something happening in between. And the error code 99 comes in when there is a problem downloading, the version, right? When you run the command update now. In that case, sometimes this happens due to any reason, right? Maybe other processes are running and it says do not want to do the update now. You can force the update and that should fix it. Okay, so that troubleshoot connection still running. So yeah, so the troubleshoot connection has given us the output. You can see from this service interface, the connection to SMCA is stable, it says, right? Connection to log streaming service, SMSM is stable, and connection to the log, feed name, NSS a cloud feed that's also stable, right? And we don't have this proxy Kafka test, so that's not what that's not what configured. So you can ignore that part. So the next command, important command to check, is the sudo NSS troubleshoot feeds, right? So this command would check similarly, right? What connection command checked for the SMCA and the SMSM and the SIM connectivity. This would check the feed connectivity, right? It would check whether there is an issue with the feeds, right? If the logs are lagging, or if there is a delay processing the logs, that's what it would give you, right? This command again takes some time. It may take few seconds, right? So you'll have to wait, right? And it depends again on how many feeds you have configured. Based on that, it may take a little more, right? Okay, so while it's running, let's go to. So okay, that's it. Okay, that command we already ran. So you can go through this PPT, run this command yourself on your test NSS, and then check what you get, right? Okay, let's see next. So yeah, that's all for this training. I'll create a new, another training, and that'll be for NSS Advanced, right? Where we'll discuss NSS in little deep, or there will be advanced topic covered. Okay. Feel free to comment if you have any questions from this training, or you want me to cover a specific thing in the NSS where you may have queries or concerns. Okay. Let's wait for this output now. Okay, so after some time, we have an output for NSS troubleshoot feed command, and this tells us the NSS is live. There is currently one active feed, right? And the connection to that feed is stable. So this is what all for today's training. Thank you very much for watching. See you in next training. Thank you.